Welcome, friends, to Beyond the Crucible, the podcast that dares to talk about setback and failure, but not so we can commiserate. It's so we can elevate. I'm Gary Schneeberger, the co-host of the show, and our mission today is to offer you the hope that your crucible experiences, those setbacks or challenges that you're facing right now or perhaps faced in the past, don't define you. They refine you. They did not happen to you. They happened for you. And I don't know many people, most shows I say I don't know anybody, and I think that's true, who knows that better than the founder of Beyond the Crucible, the host of this show, and my friend Warwick Fairfax. Warwick, we've got an excellent guest today with a really inspiring, meaningful story. So I know you're excited about it. I'm excited about it to talk with her.
Absolutely, yeah. It should be a fascinating conversation and very much looking forward to it.
That guest, folks, is Charis Santillie, who is the founder of Charis Your Life. I love that. Fearless transitions coach, speaker, and podcast host. She is a multifaceted professional with over 3 decades of entrepreneurial experience and is also a certified fearless living coach, certified fearless trainer, and positive intelligence trainer. Charis specializes in guiding successful entrepreneurial men to become chief emotional officers. I love that too, of their lives as they face personal and professional transitions. She helps them live with passion, purpose, and peace of mind as they navigate life's seasons. Passion, purpose, peace of mind. Warwick, that sounds a lot like Beyond the Crucible. So this is going to be a good conversation, I think.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Charis, for being here. And I love what you do in your podcast, Cherish Your Life. And again, it's such a great name. What you do with business leaders, in particular men, which we'll explore here, and just helping them lead, as you say, with passion, purpose, peace of mind, and because life can be challenging, and just how you help people overcome those challenges. It's very, as a coach, very inspiring. So before we get to, I guess, the pivotal moment in your life, I'd love to hear a bit of the backstory. What was life for a young Charis growing up? And I think on the West Coast, was it Washington State? What was life like for you with your parents and family? So yeah, what was life like for you growing up?
Thanks so much for having me, Warwick and Gary. So growing up, southeastern Washington State, if a lot of people think of Washington all as like Seattle, rainy, and
right.
trees.
Yep, I do. Yep.
Yeah. No. Desert, very pretty darn flat, sagebrush, lots of browns. Came to appreciate that over time when I would go back and visit. But my parents were entrepreneurs, and I got to see them like go after and achieve the American dream, literally build a business that started in our kitchen. And that was my junior high and high school, was watching that get built and seeing, a vision coming to mind is, so I was a dancer. So that was my athletic, sport of choice. And so I'd be at the dance studio, and my mom would bring if you're older generation, you would remember, the big green ledger books, before computers, BC
Right.
in that sense.
BC, yeah.
So she would have her big ledger books and be balancing the books and doing things, and then watching me for a while and doing that, because I'd be there for many hours and many nights a week. And I remember that vividly, and my both of my parents coming and watching me, and, participating in that part of my life as much as possible, and juggling the work responsibilities of growing a business and being business owners and entrepreneurs. So another vision that comes to mind is at the same place, dance studio, my dad standing in the doorway when he saw, if he was watching me and saw that I was a little topsy-turvy, like on my turns or pirouettes, and couldn't quite get my balance. And he'd just stand there and look and just go like this. And that meant focus. That just meant, and if you're listening to this, not seeing the video, I'm pointing my index finger to my forehead right in the middle. And that was the motion he would do. And I would see from across the room. And I knew what that meant was one word: focus. And so those are some fun memories coming to mind. But yeah, I saw them work very hard and then get to the point to be able to play hard too, and go on some lovely trips and take me with them to, have these great experiences to Hawaii and to Europe and stuff in high school. And it was quite a journey to be part of and watch. And help out too. I would go there after school and participate and begin, seeing like hands-on what it was like to be in a business. So true family business. So that's a little bit about the background. And I modeled after what I saw with them. So, high achieving, go getting. So then I went after and achieved as many of the accolades and things I could in school. And so that was definitely part of my childhood, was a beautiful childhood, watching this journey, being part of it, and then me modeling after and quickly becoming a high achiever myself.
It seems like in a lot of ways a pretty idyllic childhood and family. I think as I read that your parents had a gourmet pasta business, which many people would think, that is just so fun. I mean, it's one thing making widgets. I have nothing against widgets, but gourmet pasta, I mean, what could be more fun than that?
Yeah.
And, doing really well. And I don't know, I'm guessing you didn't eat pasta 7 nights a week. I imagine you probably ate it a fair amount, but, I mean, you never get sick of pasta. So that must have been pretty cool to have a family. I mean, all your friends must have said, wow, your parents ran a gourmet pasta business. That is awesome, right?
Yeah,
so.
it was a very much a community. They were very known in the community, and they were one of the significant employers of the community at the height of things, around 30 to 40 employees, and won Washington State Small Business of the Year, flew to get that award from the president at that time, and literally in the Rose Garden. Like they were very much known in our community, and then even recognized in the state. So and it was very fun. I mean, it was at a time when they were a trailblazers in the sense of like multiple flavors of pasta, and that was not a thing when they were doing this. It was a very daring bold move to go doing all of that. And then they had this 3,000 square foot, what grew to become a 3,000 square foot gift store in the front of the manufacturing warehouse. They literally took over what used to be a grocery store as they grew. And in the whole front was this retail store. My mom would do it up with all these beautiful Christmas trees at Christmas time. And we had one person come in one year that just said, I want the tree. And like, literally, she wanted the tree and everything on the tree, on that tree. And so they came up with a price, mom did, and then they got it all packed up, and she came and picked it up, or they had it delivered. Somehow they got it to their house. And like, that was the type of thing my friends would love to come over. Some of them would come get part-time jobs at different times of the year to help out seasonally. My parents, we would, support the pasta feeds that like track and field sports, or my girlfriend was on the what's the long distance? I can't think what it's called. There's track, and then there's
a marathon,
cross country.
Yes, thank you, cross country. That's what it is in here. So cross country team, they did a lot of pasta feeds because they would carbo load significantly for those long runs. And one of my girlfriends was on that, and they would provide the pasta, like tons of pasta for that type of thing. Some of the other sports too, but yes, absolutely very fun. And this is the first time I've gotten to talk about that aspect of it on a podcast, I think. So thank you for asking.
So let's get to that crucible. As you said, I think you were in your freshman year of college. So life, unfortunately, dramatically changed. So just tell folks, what happened that really changed the course of your life and your family's life.
Yeah, and I'm happy to go into as much detail as you like. I'll tell the key points, and then you can, if you want me to go into more, I'm happy to share because I think it can be helpful. But So yeah, it was after my freshman year of college. And so it was the summer I was turning 19. And this was back in the early 90s, 1994. My dad was turning 50. So we were celebrating with a hot air balloon ride. And where I live, I mentioned it was desert. So it can get really hot there, especially second half of July is usually the dead of summer, dead heat. So it's like over 100, in the hundreds, which these days has been common, but in larger areas, but that was a definite thing that we would typically face in July. And so it was like 107 degrees that day, and we almost didn't go up, but we did. The air started cooling down enough in the evening. We delayed it a bit, and then we ended up going up, and made for an extra hot ride for sure. But it was a beautiful ride. And then something went terribly wrong when we came into land. And we literally had a bumpy landing in the sense of the basket bounced and the quote unquote pilot, you can't really fly these things. I don't know if anybody who's listening has actually been on a hot air balloon or paid attention to actually how they work, but there's no steering wheel. Gary Rose's hand. Yeah. There's no steering wheel. There's no, you don't fly these like you do a plane. It's a matter of controlling the heat, the air, the flaps. And so we hit the ground. He told us, brace yourselves. We're going to hit hard. And we hit the ground and bounce back up. And then we're like, okay, he's like, okay, we really got to hold on tight and we're going to do this again. And my dad directed each of us to corners, but there weren't enough corners, not for the amount of people in the balloon, me, my mom, my dad, my brother, his wife, and then the pilot was in the center. My dad, I remember seeing him hold on to the side of the basket, and we went in for another attempt and we hit the ground hard again, and the basket tipped fully on its side that time, and my dad rolled out, and the basket got carried back up in the air again, and his foot got wrapped up with one of the cords, and he ended up getting drug about the length of a football field through farm fields, and also suspended in the air, hanging upside down by his ankle. And I remember looking over the edge of the basket and seeing him hanging there. And I immediately went into complete hysterics and would crouch down and just was freaked out. But I remember peeking over the edge. Somehow we got down. I do not remember the details of how the heck we actually got down and climbing out or anything. I just remember racing over to him, and I was still in hysterics. And he looked up at me and saw me, his little girl, completely freaked out. And he was conscious. He was not moving. But he looked at me and he said, "You should see the other guy."
So unbelievable.
So that was a crash landing. That was my crucible. What happened as a result is that my dad had a broken neck and was paralyzed. My mom turned to alcohol to cope, and that increased over time. Eventually, a couple decades later, she passed away due to alcoholism. And my coping mechanism was to amp up that hard work, be busy, head down, and kind of stuff aside some of the emotions that I, would eventually surface and needed to be dealt with when I later discovered coaching. And also therapy found me a few years later too. And, there's more to the story that gets me to what I'm doing today, but that was the key pivotal moment 30 years ago as of this summer.
Oh boy. That's a tough, obviously I'm sure think of it every year, but that's a milestone that's hard to process, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. So let's go back to the time that this happened. Those first few weeks, I'm sure, were incredibly challenging. obviously, I mean, all of you were probably just, just traumatized by it. Obviously, your mother, you mentioned, was. I mean, everybody was. How were you? What were your feelings? Was it anger, being distraught? Like, who is this balloon company? Maybe they kind of cut some corners. How did this happen? I mean, what were those emotions in those first few weeks that you were going through?
Well, the first night I remember being at the hospital, and I eventually, my, hysterics last only so long, and then you come up for air at some point. And so at some point that night I did. And then I started being more aware of my surroundings and mom and people around me, and then started to see what was hitting them and the reality and the gravity of everything. And we also didn't know what was going on. If there was brain damage, there was all sorts of issues, back in the, we're in the waiting room trying to figure out what's going on and hearing different things. And so we're just waiting. And so I realized somehow that I could be of help making some phone calls to family and their employees and friends. And so I started doing that. So that gave me a focus, which I knew how that could be helpful. It's like, okay, yeah, let's focus. Let's get down to work. Let's get busy. Let's do some tasks, and I can control that. So that's what I did. And I think that was helpful for me in certain ways, for sure. And then I remember the next morning, I remember that night being, I just remember going to bed even with wet hair, just like these weird little moments that stick in your memory of these really pivotal days. And my brother and sister-in-law staying overnight at our house, even though they lived nearby. Like, I just remember all these little pieces. That next morning, I remember standing in front of my closet trying to figure out what to pack to go on a small little tiny airplane that a local community person owned that was offering to fly me and my family to go to meet up with my dad, who'd been flown across the state to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle in the middle of the night. And a couple of girlfriends were there with me, helping me. And I remember we're all standing in front of the closet because I'm just basically kind of spinning a bit, as you can imagine. And they remember that. And I'll talk to them and they're like, yeah, we remember that moment. So that was like one of those pivotal moments. And I, just having a moment.
It's okay.
A couple of things that I did end up packing and lived in when we were there at the hospital was 3 dresses that my mom and I had bought for me, that I was going to wear one of them that day for his birthday party.
Oh.
And the house was, decorated and like ready or about to be. And there was a cake and there was like all this stuff because this was the night before his birthday. So we were having a party that day. So I'd forgotten about some of those details until just now.
Felt like the birthday that was not going to happen, or not the way it was meant to happen.
Yeah. And I had a moment just now of thinking of apologizing for getting emotional, and then I decided that that's not necessary.
Not at all. No, you have nothing to apologize for. That's.
And this is a reminder for everyone listening too, that stuff comes up even 30 years later.
Oh, yeah. It's okay to be sad. It's okay if there's something to remind you of an emotion. And I mean, we all go through that, and losses and challenges. So it sounds like you just put your head down, which is helpful in some ways. Okay, who can I call? What can I do? Do you ever remember feeling like angry or this isn't fair and my dad is a wonderful man and it's just not right. It's not fair. Do you remember any like anger at all?
Oh yeah. The most vivid angry moment to me is when I was back at school. So I was going to college just 40-minute drive away from where he was in a hospital for 3 months. And so that was interesting serendipity that I was so close, because it was like a 3.5 to 4 hour drive to the home, but 30 to 40 minutes to this hospital where he now was and where my mom got an apartment for a while. And I remember being in this, so that's when I went back to school, which was an absolute, he was like, there was no question. It was, Charis, yes, you're going back to school, as far as my father was concerned, for sure. And so I remember being in this house I was staying in on campus with 3 other girls. And I remember being alone, though, in the kitchen one day and just washing dishes and being just pissed off and throwing a dish down, not to the point of breaking, although I really wanted to do that. I wanted to have one of those moments, like you see in the movies. It's like, I wanted to just like destroy everything. I remember that moment, but it was like, throw it down in this, like, without breaking anything, it happened to be way, but a lot of tears, a lot of upset, and just, I don't know if I said it or I thought it, but it was, I want my life back.
Just talk about how your mom and dad, one, obviously dad had a, life-defining injury, but how did they, compare how they handled it, the tragedy, if you will.
Yeah, my dad, he's always was like, just the type of guy of like, get back up, just, he'll get back up and he'll go do the next thing. He'll get back up and he'll, figuratively in this sense, because this one literally knocked his body down and caused a lot of significant challenges. Technically, he's a quadriplegic, although he has since it wasn't a severed spinal cord, it wasn't to the extent of like Christopher Reeves when you think of a quadriplegic, but it was, he's a quadriplegic in the injury where it was, but he has some mobility in his upper body. He could give you a good hug, but no dexterity in the fingers, and not useful enough of the upper body. He couldn't transfer himself or move. So he was pretty limited. But he was determined to just do rehab and everything he could to strengthen and walk again. And just, he was Dale Carnegie guy. He was Post-it notes around the house and writing on the mirror with affirmations and positive thinking, and Earl Nightingale and book, all the 80s,
right.
All of that first wave of the first, probably not the first ever, but the first significant wave of personal development type things, I think, that actually laid the groundwork later for, ironically, for us as coaches in a sense too. All of that he was very much into, and he was able to keep this amazing mindset. He just is to this day, he's always had this amazing mindset. And my mom could take things more personally, could take this more personally. And they lost their business and their home in the aftermath. And that wasn't easy for him. But I can tell you, for my mother, it was like having a child ripped from her. So it, definitely took different tolls in different ways, and their coping mechanisms were very different. And she would bottle a lot of things up and then literally turned, I mean, I didn't even mean a pun when I said that, but then literally would turn to the bottle. So it's very different in how they are, as there's so many differences with each of us. You know, at the end of the day, we all have some of the same unconscious fears in a sense, but we learn different ways of coping with them. And then I think we also come into the world differently too. I think some of it is we're pre-wired in some sense, and then we learn different things through our experiences.
I want to shift a bit in a minute to just how you got beyond this. But when you see something like that, I wondered if there was a thought in your mind, Mom, why you can't you be a bit more like Dad? Because I feel like there's a sense maybe you've got a fair amount of your dad in you. I don't know. You seem like head down, push forward. You know, there's an obstacle. Okay, we'll figure it out. But did you ever get like, what's the deal, Mom? I mean, I'm going through this too, but why aren't you like Dad? I mean, did that thought ever go through your mind or something along those lines?
Yeah, great question. And a lot of firsts for me today. I've been on a lot of podcasts, but you're some very insightful questions, Warwick. Yeah, I think so, because I had a lot of creativity and grace and beautiful qualities that I think came from her. And then I also had very much this entrepreneurial, go-getter, I'll figure it out attitude that came from him. And I do remember being frustrated many a time with like, just why she couldn't stick with the AA meetings, why she couldn't, I got her into rehab a couple of times, and just why that couldn't last, why, all the things that just frustrated me to watch from the outside. And so, yeah, there was many a time, many a year that I did have that kind of perspective and inner frustration watching all of this. And then, but I think I've been able to release a lot of that, I think, in the years right before she passed, but especially this last decade.
There's sort of different strands to your sort of bounce back. I mean, I felt like you have this attitude of head down, nothing to see here, let's power forward. And maybe to the outside world, Charis looks like she's doing pretty well. I mean, graduated from college, nothing to see here. It's all systems go. It's remarkable. Wow. And obviously below the waterline, maybe there were other things. But so that's one strand. And the other is learning to forgive what happened, maybe forgive your mother's choices, forgive what happened, not forgive, but come to terms with the life-changing circumstance of your dad. So talk a bit about, I guess there's different strands, if you will, how you managed to realize maybe I'm not doing as well as I think I am, or there's stuff I need to deal with, but also just how you managed to let go of the hurt, the pain, the anger, the frustration, with your mom and just the situation. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple years a couple years after this, when I moved to San Francisco with my now husband, then boyfriend, when he was going into dental school, and I was going to go along with him to be with him. And I had come from a smaller town, it's definitely in comparison to San Francisco. So I looked in, those good old fashioned yellow pages we used to have that we would reference when we did not have Google, and found a self-defense class, because I was going to be walking and taking buses and walking in the dark and, in the city and going to a job and all the things. So I took this self-defense class. Well, it was the woman and her husband gave it. And I showed up, and it was like really a hands-on one too, where for many a time he would suit up in massive padding and we would beat the crap out of him. Thank you, Patrick, for all that you did, and Helen too. But boy, Patrick took a beating on our, to benefit us, and a lot of body challenges since then. But it was really empowering for me, especially in those times, to I think move some of that energy that had built up with me physically in that kind of way. And also, that's when I realized and met that Helen as a therapist. She just after class one day, I mentioned something or said something, or she just happened to ask me about my family. And I think I was the last one there, just grabbing my stuff and putting my shoes on to go or something. And then I just burst into tears because I'd started noticing some hidden glasses when I was visiting my, home, and realizing some things going on with mom and all this. And just watching my parents lose a lot of things. It was really hard. So and she says, I think you should come talk to me. Let's arrange a session. Cause I do this other thing too. And I think we could talk, and I want to help you. So that was a first layer getting peeled back. And then that helped tremendously through a lot of challenging moments, and just realizing how to broach these topics with my parents, face it with myself, all sorts of things. And then later, I was at a business event, and I had launched a software product, and this was about 12 years ago. And I thought I should have felt pretty darn happy. And at the time, I kind of was like, this kind of feels like what people talk about that have postpartum, because I didn't have kids, so I couldn't relate to that. But it just kind of, I imagined that that's sort of what that was feeling like for me. Like I launched this thing I created, and then I felt kind of like a lot different than I thought I would. So I'm at this business event, and I'm schmoozing with everyone, then meeting people, and I'm talking with this gentleman, and he happens to have the same name as my father. And I tell him my family story, and he looks at me and he says, I get your dad being paralyzed for almost 20 years at this time. He said, but why are you paralyzed? So that cracked open a whole nother layer, because it really, really, really rocked me. And I realized that something needed to be addressed. And then the next day I met a coach who happened to be the coach that is the founder of Fearless Living, where I became a coach eventually too. And, but these pieces one at a time started showing up and unraveling the, pointing out that I had some stuff to be dealt with. And so those were a couple of key moments for me along the journey, because it definitely and like you said, because on the outside, I looked like I had a lot together, and I could follow through, and I could get my stuff done, and all these things. But inside there was some pain that needed to be addressed, and just coping with a lot of continuing challenges. I mean, watching my parents continue to have their different phases of challenges that just felt never ending at the time.
That word paralysis, I'm sure, must have hit you like a truck. It's like, I'm doing fine. What do you mean paralysis? I'm doing great. I mean, you don't know me. What are you talking about? But as in the succeeding years, what were some of the threads of that paralysis, the bit that you felt was true, as you see yourself?
I mean, I immediately knew it was true, because it just, I felt it. I immediately was like, oh, crap, that he's right. Just, it's like I wouldn't let myself move on in some ways. Like it looked like I was moving on in a life, but there's a lot of things that I wasn't. And I find that with my clients too, in different ways. Like to no surprise, tend to work with and have people I resonate with people who are really high achieving, top of their game, and have accomplished a lot of amazing things. And yet in certain areas of their life, or what they start to realize, and what I start to help to show them, is that underneath that ambition is this chasing, a little bit of running, in some situations running from something, and in some situations chasing something, like a whole combo there. And instead of being okay with what is, and knowing that we're okay no matter what our circumstances and what we've achieved and the boxes we've checked off and how much money, like it just, that there's something about, there's a phrase I heard this last few days. It's now I can't think of it. The something ghost. It's like, it was some description of something going on inside of you. I can't think of the phrase, but there's sort of this haunting underlying thing of must keep going after these things, this almost obsessive feeling that I think can take us over in such a way that ironically can paralyze us in some way. It looks like we're moving, but we really aren't, not in maybe the ways that are healthy.
Sometimes brokenness leads us to head in directions that are not helpful, and it's fueling something that we don't realize we're doing this for the wrong reasons. So as you're talking about this, talk about how that conversation of this person saying that you're paralyzed too, that helped you pivot your whole life to what you do as a coach and speaker and working with entrepreneurial people, in particular entrepreneurial men, which is fascinating. And you talk a bit about that on your website. So talk about how that conversation led to your passion for what you do now with your podcast and coaching and so much more.
So I remember that night, the conversation was short after that because I was so rocked. And the next morning I was just clearly like, oh my gosh, I just was sort of in a trance, and made my way to end up meeting this coach and hearing she had a big family story. And then I was like, okay, big family trauma. You can help me. I'm going to check this box, and somehow you're going to help me and help save me because something's up. So I started working with her one-on-one and group programs she did and different things along the way, which helped tremendously. I did that in conjunction with therapy because they provided different sorts of approaches and help and support, and both fabulous. And then explored other different types of healing modalities along the way that came, especially in more recent years. But what I eventually found was I gave myself an excuse to do certain coach training programs with her, like as if, other people do this too that aren't actually going to become coaches, which is true. Many people take coaching programs, including hers, that don't actually have an intention of becoming a coach, but they want to improve their communication, because coaching, true life coaching, especially traditional life coaching, is all about communication and no agenda, not as a consultant, just truly showing up, being able to ask the best question we can, trust ourselves to ask the next best question, and poke in and shine a light on for the client on what's going on with them, what they can't see, and help them find the answers within themselves and reveal that over time. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just doing this to be a better communicator with my family and my husband and my employees for my current business. And, that's why I'm doing this. But ultimately I found I really wanted to do it like something was pulling me. So it was a different feeling than this chasing, going for something, for something, grabbing at things. and checking the boxes. It was like a pull, like, oh my God, I must do this. But I couldn't give myself permission initially. So eventually, different things happened to allow me to release whatever I was trying to control and give myself permission to be able to want to do something different and want to be a coach and want to do that as my full-time gig. And so I eventually found my way to do that and figured out how to make that my deal. But what I found with, I mean, I have some women that are clients, and those women tend to be pretty hard charging type A women's, because that's the type of woman I am and have been.
Right.
And if anything, like, I believe we all have masculine and feminine energy. And if anything, I had the masculine dialed up a bit too high for some time. And so it was learning for me even how to be able to up and down and adjust these to help myself, empower myself, and help those around me at the right times, and utilize these energies in the best ways, because nothing's good or bad. It's just, I think it was a bit amped up. So I think that's why one of the reasons I relate so well to men, and why they've found that I can help them and deliver some of these more challenging messages and such. So that's a little bit of, the more recent years and what brought me to actually coaching, and specifically a lot of men as well.
And what you just said about your masculine energy, you said something to me when we talked before we started recording, that you used to have this motto for life, right? You were kind of the go for it person, right? And then you realized, wait a minute, I want to be the flow for it person. Talk about that a little bit, because that's an important mind shift, I think, that helps you, if I read you correctly when we talked, sort of tap into a little bit more regularly some of your feminine energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was very much that go, do, and you got this, and you can do it. And, I just found over time, someday that literally popped in my head. I just flow for it. And I was like, oh, like, even if you watch the video, my shoulders just dropped as I said that. It just feels so much better. And it's not, to be very clear. And when you think about being in flow, like, this is not a passive,
right?
This is not a passive thing. This actually requires some action. So it's not just being like, I'm going to lay back and like life's just going to happen to me. There is participation that needs to happen on my side. Yet it does not need to be so like forceful. And it can be okay that maybe I want to spend a couple hours in the morning puttering around, and that's when I end up, while I'm making my coffee and taking my time and doing my stuff, I can do a little work task if I want to, or I can listen to my thing, and whatever it is, like, just my life can be whatever works for me. And it doesn't have to look the way it used to, which used to be like get up and barely brush my teeth and then be at my desk. It also can be that I have a podcast. I haven't posted a new episode in like 4-ish months. I did it almost every single week. I think I only skipped 1 week and maybe 1 or 2 repeats over 2 years. And then various things happened. Well, my dad was in the hospital this summer, so that definitely, which he's doing better and now, but it was serious. It was a scary time, and then that led to one thing and then another, and then I realized I don't have the capacity to do this, and I'm going to be fine with it. So I just let it go, and it's okay, and I'll come back to it if and when I'm ready, probably in the next month or so. But like, that's an example of something that I probably would have powered through, done late nights or weekends to make sure that would happen. Cause how dare you skip a week or 2 or 3 or God forbid, a month or 2 or 3, that wouldn't have been part of the prior equation. I wouldn't have given myself that grace. So that's like, hey, the flow of this summer was family priorities of some scary moments. Then, okay, what do I need to focus on next? And then the next, and then the next, and letting a lot of stuff go off the waist, get set aside to be revisited later, or a lot of emails and messages. Heck, this summer too, I even, as an example of giving myself huge grace and understanding my energy, I needed a kind of like a rock to help stabilize me. And I had a girlfriend come over one day when I was facing some really scary moments and figuring out, okay, one-way ticket to go visit my dad. I don't know how long he's going to be in the hospital. I don't know what's about to happen. And I was spinning, again, a moment of paralysis for me. But I thought, I'm going to text my girlfriend. She can come over and sit with me and help me just book my flight, make my travel arrangements, message my clients, set up an auto reply, all these things that felt so simple, yet were super overwhelming. And she sat with me for 4.5 hours, and she sat there, and I turned around and she says, I feel like I'm doing nothing. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here. This is doing so much for me. You have no idea. And I will not hesitate in the future to do that sort of thing. And I've used it as an example with some clients too, of like, hey, I'm still doing the work myself. And this human experience is not mean that like we are made of steel, and we need to give ourselves more breaks. This is not a race. And there is no top of the mountain. Like one of my clients gave me a testimonial, and it says something to the effect of, when you're really dedicated to personal development, you get to the top of one mountain and then you realize you're at the bottom of another.
That's so true. Boy, so much what you said there, Charis, is profound. I feel like there was maybe a turning point where you decided, I'm not going to keep doing what I think I should do. I'm going to live in light of who I am, my inner soul, purpose, meaning, and other people may think it's good or bad, and I don't care. I'm not going to follow everybody else's rules. And I felt like there was part of that, if that makes sense. And I'm going to be me. I don't quite know where it's going to go. I'm going to flow for it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to put my paddles in the water as I'm flowing and shifting from bank to bank. But does that make sense? Like it felt
absolutely.
Like there was a
you
paradigm shift for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And a big thing for me. So in Fearless Living, one of the things we work with, most personal development, it's all about having some sort of mental models to help make sense of things so that we can like release the constricting parts of our brain that are keeping us stuck and embrace more of our brain and our capacity and find that ease and that contentment and that flow. And one of the things that I do with many clients is work through a lot of the fearless living concepts in alignment with, along with many other things that I've brought in different modalities, but that's been my core. And we have what we figure out what their wheel of fear and wheel of freedom is. And in the wheel of freedom, there's what we call our essential nature. And that is what we have. That is the first thing to go out the window whenever we're triggered. And it's the first thing that we need to figure out how the heck to access when we are triggered, if we don't want to get spinning in a disempowering way. So mine, there's one of 10, any model framework typically has a certain number of things to just, again, try to make sense of things. So mine is out of the 10 is trusting. And so it's trusting myself. And that was a big one for me to really, really embody. And I still have my moments, but for the most part, I have improved on that immensely over the years. And then each year I've noticed like it's been an exponential new level. And it's been really interesting for me to see and look back and think, wow, there's another whole level. And then just think, what's possible to come? This is interesting. to see the things that don't rattle me like they used to, or the fact that it didn't take but a moment for me to think, I'm going to text my girlfriend. Like it just the ways I take care of myself now, and the trust in those little moments of thoughts or knowings it's completely changed my life.
I feel like what I'm hearing is you're also giving yourself some grace.
Yeah. Well, my name actually means grace.
Oh, really? Well, maybe you're more fully living in light of your name, of who you are. I mean, as we kind of just wind up here a bit, and you talk about this, and I've certainly experienced it in my own life in some ways. I feel like what you said is what you went through, and as you're helping driven entrepreneurs, in particular entrepreneurial men that very often are just head down. Society says as men, we're not meant to feel or cry or, reflect, just head down, power forward, which is extremely unhelpful. But I have a feeling some of what you've gone through as you're helping others and your coaching and all the work you do in the podcast, that there's some measure of healing, maybe some measure of self-learning. I know there is for me. Every conversation I have, I feel like, oh, gee, that's something for me to learn in my own life. It's hard for me to remember a podcast we've had at 200 plus. I'd be hard pressed to think of any conversation I've had that I felt like I haven't learned something profound that's helped me. Anyway,
isn't it fabulous? I love it myself. I'm so grateful. It's like magic. It's like a magic potion. It's delightful. This immediate benefit that we get from it. It's so wonderful. I completely relate. It is phenomenal. I'm so grateful that it's helping me every conversation. In fact, it's now to the point where I even caught myself with something going on with another client, or realizing a newer client I have, and I can tell just that I can see some things going on there that we're going to be working on in the coming year together. And I kind of look at like, is that a mirror for anything going on with me or in my past or with me now or something, just wondering what else I can learn from this. So there's the moments of I'll hear myself saying things, and either in the moment or after I'll be like, oh, that was good. Like that good for me too. Meaning like not like, oh, that like I needed to hear that. And I love that literally I've learned more about the brain, and we are reinforcing the messages to our brain. Like as coaches, as we say these things, we get to hear the words, they're coming out of our mouth, and it's helping like provide the evidence so that we're convincing our own self and creating and reinforcing our own pathways in our brain that this is actually the better way to go. So it's this amazing benefit back to us. And then I caught myself going a little further with that, and sometimes actually reflecting upon what clients are going through and seeing, is there anything else in there, some juice I can squeeze out of that like for myself?
I'm going to jump in, Warwick, because
Please.
I just heard our captain turn on the fasten seatbelt sign, indicating we have begun our descent on this conversation, which is a fascinating conversation. For me, it's fascinating because you're both coaches, so I feel like I'm getting a front row seat to kind of a live coaching session, which is sort of cool. That doesn't normally happen. But we're not ready to land the plane yet, folks. Warwick's got at least one more question, probably a couple more. So I'll turn it back over to you, Warwick.
Well, Charis, again, it's wonderful to talk. And I feel like we live in a somewhat similar space, maybe similar heart for, what we're trying to do in our own coaching, podcast, discussion way, help people. So, there may be somebody listening today, and maybe they feel like today's their worst day. They feel like there's no hope. Maybe they're like a lot of the folks that you coach. They're driven, head down. Okay, this wasn't fun. The way to deal with it is full speed ahead. Reflection's overrated. I'm just going to power through because I'm tough, I'm resilient, I'm strong. But maybe what would a word of hope be, either for the person that's in the bottom of the pit or the person that feels like life's not great, but life's not meant to be great. I'm just going to power forward and, I don't know, pick up my, feet every day, and I'll just get through the day somehow. Life's not meant to be easy, and it's meant to be agony and painful, but oh well, whatever. Let's just keep going. What would maybe a word of hope, or maybe a way to shift that person's thinking, if you will?
Well, I think that, well, I know you have to be ready and willing if you're going to shift anything. So if you really are convinced that head down is the way to go, then okay, keep going. And at some point, maybe some other message or some person or something will strike you when you're ready to hear it. If this hasn't quite struck you yet, maybe it's not your time. So, we can only throw out there and shine the light and show you that there are some other options. And there's this beautiful saying, I don't know who said it. Pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. And so, if you do the work like we've done and are still doing, that we've talked a bit about here today for sure, and that we help clients with, you actually, I guess I'm asking you to trust me in hearing that you actually can reduce your suffering. And if you're all about hard work, I will tell you that the hardest work you will ever do is inner work. So if you want to take on a challenge and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good for hard work and I'll just put my head down, let's go like head down in and do the inner work. And you tell me, what you think about that later. Although it's the hardest in many ways, it will relieve your suffering faster. It is the way to have relief happen faster. But you've got to go the only way, you got to go through, you got to go in and through this. But it doesn't have to feel there's a saying my coach says, it's the feelings the feeling you're afraid to feel is running your life. The thing about feelings is there's even been science around this. Like the physiological response to it is only, to my understanding, it's around 60-ish seconds. Literally, like the chemical, all the stuff that will happen if you don't glob on and grab to it. But we push it aside, or we do take certain ones for a ride and then we avoid others and all these things. So it's a matter of starting to learn how to let some of that energy surface, face some things, but it doesn't have to be in this whole dramatic, like talk therapy for hours every week for 10 plus years before you see results. There's so many options now that can fast track some of this that used to not be there 20 years ago, with certain coaching, especially if you got to find someone you resonate with, other types of healing modalities, all sorts of beautiful therapy things. I've done EMDR, like there's so many things out there now. Mm-hmm. But you have to have a little bit of you being willing. And if just a little bit of you is willing, that could be enough to put a little toe in the door and lessen the suffering just a smidge-roo. And I'm telling you, it feels so much better. So just trust me if you don't trust yourself first, and give it a go. And if you need to take it on as a challenge from me, then go for that too, whatever it takes.
Friends, I've been in the communications business long enough to know when the last word's been spoken on a subject. And our guest, Charis Santillie, has indeed just spoken it. And remember, folks, everything that she just said, she told us earlier in this episode, her name, Charis, means grace. Remember that. She's offering you grace. What we've talked about here is to offer you grace as you navigate your way back from your crucible experience. Until we're together next time, please remember, we understand your crucibles are difficult. We've talked about that here. Charis's crucible very difficult. Warwick's Crucible, which he's talked about in many of our episodes and certainly talked about here, was very difficult as well. My own Crucible, very difficult. But here's the good news there. It's not the end of your story. In fact, if you learn the lessons from that Crucible, if you apply yourself to that Crucible, if you trust, Charis, what she said, if you trust that better days are ahead, those better days can indeed be ahead. Learn those lessons, chart that course, and where that's going to lead you is to what we call at Beyond the Crucible, a life of significance. Welcome to a journey of transformation with the Beyond the Crucible assessment. Unlike any other, this tool is designed to guide you from adversity to achievement. As you answer a few insightful questions, you won't just find a label like the helper or the individualist. Instead, you'll uncover your unique position in the journey of resilience. This assessment reveals where you stand today, the direction you should aim for, and crucially, the steps to get there. It's more than an assessment. It's a roadmap to a life of significance. Ready? Visit beyondthecrucible.com. Take the free assessment and start charting your course to a life of significance today.